Today we're going to spend about 45 minutes running through an agenda which I think has been sent to everyone, and at the end we'll have quick Q&A. So if you wish, if you've got a burning question you think is relevant for this forum, please send it through to Amanda on the chat within the seminar itself, and we'll try to get to them at the end. Apart from that, if things do pop up, you can come through to your own consultant on that. All right, so here we go. So my agenda, as I say, is to go through these points which have already been given to you. So I'll start by just looking briefly at global search. So global search is not a new feature for Sage in effect, but I don't know that everyone is using it. So I thought I'd just call it out. Now global search itself is up here on the main menu, and the nice thing about it is reasonably global. It doesn't cover every area, but mostly. So for instance, inventory control transactions, for instance, if you're doing an adjustment, you might have a stock take and you're looking for something out of that. So that's where you would do your search. But for instance, today I'm just looking across the system for the word Ronald. There is a customer called Ronald English and another one called Ronald Black. So we can see that we're finding a customer number, or you might be able to just search on, maybe it's a unique amount. And you can see here I'm getting 2 entries. So I'll get a combination sometimes of actual transactions if I've selected them, or master data. The nice thing is, so it's not only quick and global, but it's also linked. So you can click on it and then you're into that transaction. So I see it as a great shortcut to finding inside Sage, and you might see that you're maybe just searching, for instance, inside payable vendors. So you can turn off all other transactions and just then search on just vendor, well, vendor and items in this case, and you'll only get vendors with the word black in them, which may be none in this case. Maybe that was a customer. Okay, this refresh button is only available to the administrator, and that's how it updates the data. It does it on a regular basis. Uses different tech to the rest of Sage because it's trying to be fast and global. So if it's not working in your instance, sometimes there's certain blockers to that different tech. So it just needs solving with your IT or your consultant. Okay, the next thing on my agenda is just looking at some macros. Now Sage supports VBA. So those of a tech bent can get in and go crazy. It takes a moment to develop the first part of it because it needs to comply with the Sage's requirements. But they do actually ship with a couple of macros, which are of some use, already built in. Now those macros can be found under the macro menu, which has sort of been sitting in front of most of us for years. And if you wish, you can have a little look. These are the classics, which are in a folder inside the Sage install. And of course, these can be added too. So the macro we're looking at the moment, firstly, is just called cash flow. What I've done in this case is I've put it under bank services, which seem rather central. To add things into Sage, for those who don't know, it's just right click if you have permission, macro, and then follow your nose through those screens. So this is the age cash flow macro. And as you can see, it's asking for dates and periods. And it's also asking for which accounts you're going to assess on. So I'll just go with the first bank account, and I'll just go with the default periods in front of me. And I'm not recalling quite what the data looks like in this year, but we'll see. Now what it's doing is it's pulling out data relevant to those cash flow information and pushing it into Excel. It's as essentially a data pump. Then, as a macro is wont to do, is developing extra sheets with pivot tables. And so essentially trying to give us cash flow projections based, of course, on aging. So I'm not sure if that's very visible in the background, but if we look at the area here, you can see that's a summary of cash flow for received and payables. And that's the aging that it's doing on the individual documents to get us those summaries. So I don't want to look too much into the detail of that, but just to make the comment that we do have, that's out of the box. It's not an additional feature. That's out of your box. But the question might well be, oh, it doesn't do this, doesn't do that. You can deconstruct it or just use it as a data pump yourself and say, well, that's what I'm interested in. I'll just have that page, please. And of course, it is a pivot table, so enjoy. All right, so that's one, and the nice thing is that maybe that's not been exposed to if you haven't had that in your initial training, or if in fact you haven't been trained yourself personally within the Sage system. So we've also got another macro that I think I'll call out, and I've said here OE Reverse Invoice Macro. So the Reverse Invoice Macro is an interesting one. It makes a transaction based on a prior transaction, and as I recall, I've put it here as a shortcut. Again, right-click New Macro and put it there. What is the macro? The macro itself is called something clever like Reverse Invoice. Okay, so there it is. And if we just run that, what this asks us to do is to select an existing invoice. And what it will do, it will create a new shipment, a reversal based on the date that you're logged in. So it is limited to what it's being designed to do. So for instance, in this copy of Sage, I've logged in today, 23rd of November. So when I pick up my macro, where do I put it? I'll come back to it that way. So if I come and find an invoice, so this is a finder, by the way. So you can see with macros, finders aren't necessarily Sage standard, but the invoice finder itself is. And then you hit proceed. And what it will do is identify the detail behind that, create a credit note, and then create a shipment. So this is order entry. So what it's doing is crediting that original invoice. So again, you don't get a lot of input on that. That creates that on a date. So if this area might be of interest, it might be useful where you've got large orders in order entry with multiple lines, many items, and creating a credit might be tedious. Of course, you know, that's in addition to Sage's standard functionality where you've got credit notes here. But this is trying to do two steps at once. So again, may not suit many, but it's interesting that it's there. It also could be used as the basis for creating further macros if that's of interest. Okay. User management. So the next area I just want to look at as an advanced area for those with either administrator or senior privileges. Privileges, of course, are managed through this area here for those who can, groups and authorizations. I wanted to look at a couple of areas. So the first area is under current users in help, you can see who's in the system. If you're in as administrator, you can pick a user and sign them out. Now, this might be common to some, but maybe not to all. So if I then enter my administrator password and click sign out, it forces that user out of the system, which is obviously useful for things like if you're doing a year end, for instance, and the general ledger is showing a user in. Rather than having to restart workstations or even maybe a server, you can come in and sign out users. Another key point is that if you click this button here, it will show you the screens the users are in, which many use on a regular basis, and also when, which is handy because you can say this user logged in yesterday and today I'm trying to kick them out. Would that screen be active? No, because it's been open for 12 hours. So you can use that as a guide to what's happening on where your users are in the system. Another area which has recently grown, I think it came in 2022, but 23 has got further, is the report has been split out. There was always a user authorization report with a Z. It's now better. So it now has better English. Okay. The previous report was a bit grumpy. And so this report still shows you in great detail for each user. So for instance, Andrew here has got full NAP, which means they have access to all these areas. So obviously that's a very long list and you would need to, take that with, you don't necessarily have to show the authorizations. You can show a lesser in this report. So that report has been there for a while, but this is maybe a better summary. Okay, excuse me, I'm just trying to find my summary. I'll just go through here, that'll do. Okay, there's also other features, I think. Yes, I'll come back to them later. 64-bit financial reporter. This is more of a shout out for the most recent versions of Sage. So if you're on the older version and this looks of interest you, we do need to upgrade you. But financial reporter, of course, is launched from within the general ledger and allows us to print directly into Excel. So this is that one part of Sage where the print, for instance, destination is down here because it's trying to generate it inside Excel first and then provide Excel with what output it uses. Until version, I think, 2022, we weren't able to support 64-bit Excel. Now we can. So when you launch it, it will work if it's 64-bit. Given that we also have tweaked any Excel security, we often see security in Excel being tight and preventing our add-ins from working until they're opened up. Again, that's IT or with your consultant. So I think 64-bit Excel is a bit of a win because we see increasingly some clients using large Excel sheets and seeing that your resources are heavily used. Of course, you've got a line limit in 32-bit Excel as well, but in 64 it's a million. And also it allows it to use more memory. So it just makes it that much faster. Not relevant if you're only using normal size spreadsheets or they're not presenting as slow. So that's the main advantage there from an Excel point of view. Okay, if we moving along, excuse me, just grabbing my notes here. We talk a little bit also about multiple company management. So in that area, I'm just talking about how we manage Sage when you're running more than one main company. Now, most might have at least an operating company and maybe a few holdings, and there's a trust somewhere up your sleeve. So especially as the senior in the finance team, it's not uncommon that you're trying to manage multiple. And so for many clients, they do it this way, where you run Sage twice. It's a first comment. It's a basic use of Sage where you can have it on twice. Now, notice I click Ran As. You don't have to. It depends on how you run Sage, but your ability to run two companies side by side, I think, is an important feature, and it might not be emphasized enough for some. The nice thing is that it doesn't use another license. So if, for instance, let's say you've got 5 user licenses in your local area network, if I turn Sage on twice in one PC or on one environment, I don't create a problem. Maybe this company's dead, I wasn't sure. I don't create an issue for licensing. I just am allowed to use it twice with one user license because it recognizes it's coming through one channel, which is great because it doesn't burn up any licenses that you would want to be allowed others to use. Another point about multi-user, excuse me, that company may also be no good. That's the problem with having many companies in your start menu. Another point is that we can obviously allocate different colors to each company, and that is also reflected down here. Okay, so I really have killed that one. So let me just try one more time. So there we go, there's another sample company. All right, so this company here, for instance, has this off green color. And when you launch a part of that, for instance, if I go to payables and maybe just look at the vendors, that screen is also the same color. And when you hover over it, the pop-up you see is that color. If I have another company, let's say it's blue, and I hover over it, I'll see that it's blue. So you can manage multiple companies. I'm really having trouble with my company lists today. So you can manage multiple companies without, if you can turn them on, without an issue on one workstation. So I see that as a common use for some clients, but I just have noticed sometimes that it's not everyone in the firm has known this, and have been classically going into Sage, closing one company, which is, if I just shut down some screens here, closing a company and then opening the new one. So, excuse me, I'm just having some fun with my second company. I'll just turn that off. It's a theory. So you can, of course, just close down one company and then reopen it. Doing that will get you the effect of using the second, but in my opinion is less efficient than having those two at once. And in fact, yeah, so that's one area that I just point out as a standard common feature under multiple companies. It's not a new trick or anything. It's just part of the standard system. Other areas that I would point out is that with multiple companies, we do see some clients say updating a master area in one company and they're having to do it like a GL. And it might be that there's 7 companies with a similar GL and they want to add a number of accounts or a section of accounts, a new department or some such, and then needing to repeat that into multiple companies. If that's the case, I would, as a first option, I wouldn't ignore the ability to export out a chart into Excel, which is a standard Sage feature, and then maybe in Excel chopping it down just to those dozen new accounts, and then importing it into these other companies, assuming of course they have the same GL structure. This also can be done with all master data. So for instance, inside your item list, you may be running a same item list in 2 companies or the same vendor list more commonly. So you can manually export and import, which is great if you it's ad hoc, occasional, but might be a long list, rather than rekeying for sure. So not to be ignored, master files. Of course, exporting from Sage is, I wouldn't call that advanced, I call that pretty standard. By exporting, you're able to manipulate all of your data in Excel to see it in one easy place. Also, for instance, as is commonly done, you might want to update addresses or statuses and so on. You can do that in Excel and then re-import that, which is keeping in mind that for master data, that's reasonably safe, because if you've already created, say, a vendor code, once you export that, change some addresses, say, and import it, you're not creating a new vendor code, you're just overriding the current. But that is also, so as I say, that's a multi-company functionality. Another core function in Sage which supports multi-company is the idea of common systems. So the user list in a company is set up in the background. If you've got, and I have some clients who might have 30 companies, some have more, and they want a common set of a dozen users across all of them. And so for those, we would definitely suggest that they have one system. It's a background setup in Sage. Consultants can support it if you don't. And in that one system, any changes made to one user are propagated or available as a user setup across all systems. Also, your security groups, which is where we do the Sage security grouping, is common then. Good news is, of course, that per company, you can still lock people out or allow them in. So if I have 30 companies as a user, I'm allowed only into 6 of them. I'd only be authorized within 6, but my name would appear in all 30 in various lookups if someone's doing admin. Okay, so that's quite an important feature. Another area which is fairly new in Sage is the ability, and I've okay, no, so it's not new. It's an advanced module, so I'll take that back. Not so much new as an advanced module. There's a crew which I talk about to my clients called Tairox, which are out of Canada. who are very senior Sage developers, originally involved in the writing of the program, the key operator there. And they've written a number of different modules which enhance Sage, and possibly a core one is their productivity tools. So productivity tools is what they call their suite. It's about 50 small or sometimes medium-sized functionality tools. So for instance, enhanced order entry allows you to see more on the screen when ordering, and there is quite a large range of tools. So if I look at, you can see that it's talking about invoicing and so on. It's got quite a few, and all of these enhance these areas. So if you're an operational system using a lot of order entry, and it's not already customized, sometimes it's already got its own customization sitting on there, this is well worth looking at, because classically you might see 4 or 5 of these areas of use. So getting the whole suite is well worth it. But the area I'd like to talk about at the moment for multi-company is what they call their extended screens. So wherever it says extended, it allows us to extend the operation of one company into multiple. So the idea is it's not really for people running one core trading company. It's for those with multi-companies which have the need to be kept concurrent, so aligned. So for instance, in this screen, this is a normal GL account screen. So this is where we normally update the Sage General Ledger. And what we're looking at here is the standard screen, but with an additional button. So that button is what we're in here for. When we click that, then we launch an inquiry screen, essentially, which comes from the Tairox itself. And I just wonder if that's been moved off of onto my second monitor. Yes, it has. So that's a multi-monitor problem. By the way, shift right click on these tabs is your friend. It took me years to find that. so then you can move manually without having to suffer monitor hell. Okay, so what is this? This is an additional screen saying, what accounts am I interested in? So it's got a large selection set of criteria. So once you fill that out, so you might be interested only in one segment, then you click load and it loads whatever your selection was. So that's pretty straightforward. So this is like an advanced selection screen. And you can even, as you can see, Tairox really goes to town on making their functionality endless. So you might not want to select on one of these. You might want to select on something a bit crazy inside the, like the roll-up switch. Only select those that are assigned Sage roll-up, which is a reporting concept. So the criteria allows you to pick anything. Once you pick your thing and press load, it loads this screen, which allows us to then pick and choose which accounts we want to assess to use to copy. So if I just go select all, okay, now I've selected a range, but I might not want to copy this, or I might want to rechange my range. Additionally, when you move from company to company in the general ledger, one of the key segments that would normally change is like an entity segment. So if you've got entity 1 and we're copying it across to entity 2, then I would suggest that you would use the Tairox's automatic segment change. So the segments get updated in the second company correctly. Once you've done that sort of admin, then click on copy, and the copy screen, again, whether or not that's popped out elsewhere, will then offer a range of, I'm just looking at my copy screen, whether or not it's gone to another monitor. I think it's a monitor issue here. I can't see it. The point here is not to fully demonstrate the product, so I think I might stop there. But so the copy screen then allows me to select the companies I wish to copy this selection to. So I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in there, but I might give it up for a moment. So my point being that by having a multi-company tool, I'm allowed to use that to manage any of these areas that Tairox provide to me within one company. So my general ledger is one. You can do the same for just segments or account groups, which are the master areas. For instance, in payables, the same idea with vendors. So when I launch the vendors screen, I get the same functionality idea where copy vendors allows me to select a range of vendors, load those, and then copy those across. Okay, so I will just let that languish. All right, so I'm not saying that this is for everyone. Certainly, if you're using some of the advanced features in Tairox and have multi-company, then it's a free add-on as well. So this is a module which is an advanced module in Sage, and as modules go, it's not too pricey as I know, but it's a very useful area. The good thing is that it's pretty much doesn't need much training because out of the box the screens are the same, but with an additional button. Yeah, so I see Tairox as a major productivity enhancer where you're running with multi-company and needing to maintain multi-master data. Okay, we also have other multi-company tools. So there's additional add-ons. So there's a crew in Sydney called Awkward and make an extensive tool called Awkward Interentity, which some clients use, which allows us to generate inter-entity transactions, raise a purchase order in entity one, and it will automatically create, maybe it's around the other way, create an order entry order in entity one, and it might raise a purchase order on entity two from entity one automatically, as an example of transaction types. And or a general ledger journal. You might generate a journal in entity two and it generates matching journals in other entities automatically. It does take some setup because obviously you've got to get your rules right, but it's very effective and allows us to automate where especially there's volume and multi-company trading going on. So again, inter-entity is exactly what it says on the box, allows us to manage multiple companies much better. I don't think that it's for everyone because certainly some companies, even if you do have inter-entity, if it's minor volume, you just have to do a cost benefit. But if your volume starts getting large, I'm a bit of a fan. Okay, I'll try to stick to my agenda here, see where I'm going. Geo-consolidation. Okay, so geo-consolidation is another area which I suppose is by very default a multi-company function. Geo-consolidation is a core Sage module, so it's reasonably straightforward to set up and use. If you are using Sage subscription, which not everyone is, but if you are, it's part of the subscription pack of modules. If you're not, it's not a particularly pricey module. What it allows us to do is to, I'm just looking here, I can explain it. From each company, we can export the general ledger, either straight trial balance as a single amount, movements per month, or transactions. So if you're, for instance, looking for all the general ledger transactions, you would pick a transactions export, and you can see here that it's asking me what am I going to select, and these are the codes that I'm using, and transactions by fiscal period is my process that I've chosen here. It allows you to basically store those transactions in a corner, it pushes them out to a file, and let's say we've got 7 companies. One is a consolidation company. So you export the data for the period or half year, whatever it may be up to, from 6 companies. You go to the 7th company and import that into the 7th company's GL. Supports multi-currency. So if you've got currency translations, you can nominate the rates or use the internal rates in Sage. It supports mapping tables. So if your 7 companies don't all have the same GL chart,
classically, maybe they're mostly the same with some variation. It's called here, in this company, it's called 1,000, but over in that company, it's called 1,200 for some reason. In the master company, you want it all to be 1,000, you map across. Your map is done once, and then it uses that whenever exporting. So essentially, that allows you then to go to your GL consolidation company and do a couple of things. It allows you to review, inquire, and report on all transactions in one place, which can be quite powerful. And of course, the reporting itself. So you can use your standard or customized financial reports, say in General Ledger, not only your trial balance, but your full financials, and run your consolidated profit and loss from that module. So yeah, quite powerful. And again, it's a multi-company feature, which I think a lot do need, as opposed to sometimes we see companies with smaller numbers of Sage entities. You might be pulling out multiple trial balances and doing something in Excel to get a consolidation, and we can automate that. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at on my agenda is some of the Sage help, which has grown nicely in the last few versions, is broadly the same. First comment is help's always under the screen you're in. So if you go to vendors, for instance, which is a nice little screen, you might want to know something about that screen. If you press F1 on the keyboard, which I just did, it'll always launch help. It always has. In the more recent versions of Sage, it launches it on the web. And the reason for that is it can be more comprehensive and updated. So this is not dissimilar to the previous help that we've been running. What, just quickly with help, of course, you go to fields and controls, you pick the tab you're on. This is the address tab. You pick the field you're interested in. My classic is say, look at the on hold, what's going on, and you click on that, and then it gives you the full description. So that's just the standard help, nothing particularly new. I just wanted to point out not only that that exists, but also that we have, well, if we go to that web screen, actually, I'll just come back to it. Just a note that that's not just AP and one screen, that's the everything. So you can navigate on the left and go to other modules. So this is the full suite. So you can jump across and read all about anything in here. So that's actually quite comprehensive. We've also got guides, so they can be useful to have a PDF, something offline. You might find that not everyone has access to the web at all moments. Pick your module and pick your user guides, and there they are. So when you run that, it pulls it down off the web. It's, as you can see, it's a PDF, and so this is the full guide, which essentially mirrors help, but may well be 600 pages, 589 close. Okay, so, and the nice thing is that those documents are available to anyone. You don't need a special login or to be, you know, a super guru of some sort. There they are. Okay, so that's quite useful, and I would suggest that, especially if you're trying to understand the system or building your own procedures, that's not a bad spot to start. Sage also have their own online community. So in here, this is reasonably useful. You can ask questions of other users, or more likely browse it. So click in there and have a look. If you've got a particular issue, when I do this, I see this issue or error. You might just, you know, usual browsing in that forum, look up the error description, and someone else might have an answer. Consultants like myself included get in there and do try to assist. It's a worldwide community, there's a lot going on, so that can be quite useful. For new users, Sage have a university concept, which is online courses, which try to guide you through essentially, you know, processing, right, let's do an invoice. And so worth looking at, essentially for new users, or maybe you have a point question like running year end. Some of the courses are free, that is, they don't charge you. Otherwise, they might sting you a few $100 to go through a good number of hours of training. So I think valuable. But maybe you want to do year end and you've forgotten all about it, you can click in there and have a look at their guide, which talks you through the whole process. And once you do create a profile and log in, it tracks it for you. And if you are doing courses, it gives you certificates. It's the classic online university, so not too bad. And again, I think that's grown a fair bit recently. So probably they're the key things that you would use: F1 help, documents, community and the university. Okay. Now, advanced modules. So I branched into Tairox earlier, and I think that it's worth mentioning that Tairox, so we talked about this, I'm bored now. Tairox do have far more than just that module, and I do single them out for a bit of extra love, just because it's quite extensive, and we've got to give the Canadians their due. They can be quite clever, and so Tairox themselves, if you just go to Tairox, it's a nice name because it's unique. It's a bit like Kodak, easy to remember, and no one else is already using it. And so you can down here just have a look and say, well, productivity tools, well, we'll mention that. Rates, so there's a rates tool that downloads rates off the web. However, you know, are the rates out of the that it pulls from the web the ones you want, you know, those sort of questions. It's got a collections management tool, which assists with accounts receivable. It sits on top of your receivables data and acts as like a mini CRM and helps you follow up your overdues. Can do things like resend invoices and statements attached to each other neatly, easily. It's quite functional, and so on and so on. So there's quite a bit in there. So these are specific point solutions. It's also got some data management tools, which are quite functional. So if you're dealing more in the back end, maybe more at a consulting, we would deal with a client who might need to copy companies around the place. We've got some enhanced copy tools within here if we use Tairox. So yes, I say that's well worth a look. Another one I would just broadly mention is that across in New Zealand, another lovely crew of people called Pacific Technologies make a number of tools. One of them I've got here is called Audit Logger. Audit Logger allows us to set up across the different areas of Sage to log transaction or master data activity. So for instance, take accounts payable, take vendors. You can turn on some vendor logging, currently not configured. Keep it simple. This is for those with permissions, of course. I'll just turn on high-level logging. If you turn on custom, you can turn on or off what fields are audited or triggered. Okay, so normally not high-level everywhere because over time it builds up a big database and has some purging ideas as well to keep that database small. But you can see that if we've got across most modules and most areas, including transactions, what we can log. So it starts with it off. So once you turn logging on and then you do something, so for instance, change an address, which in vendors is quite important. Maybe you'd need to keep a track of that. So I'm putting in a change there. So I've changed that, good on me. And then I go to Audit Logger later, might be later in the year, a report. No, don't want a report, it's too hard. I'm gonna go to the inquiry, which is online, and click on that. And you can see here that it's starting to log the changes that I've done. Okay, so for instance, this is me changing the audit settings. And I wonder if I changed the right audit setting because I didn't see it log. The vendors, I've turned the vendors view to unlimited. Okay, did I save my vendors change? So then it will log and manage what I'm doing inside the system. So I should see that that is logged. But I haven't tested in this system, but it's definitely highly functional. The only problem I do see with Audit Logger, just a core point, is that data. So don't turn on logging of everything. If you do have this module, just log those things that you're going to monitor. Yeah, so we have a number of clients using that, and maybe it's an actual audit requirement from their audit team, or they just want extra controls and management. So for instance, around creation of new master records, or even transactions. Keeping in mind that transactions entry is not normally quite so heavily required because Sage itself is a fairly strong audit trail. Once you've posted a transaction, there it is forever. But this will tell you who did it exactly and at what time of the day and what monitor they use, what screen they use, and so on. Okay, Pacific Tech also have another set of modules around workflow. So workflow for purchasing to procurement, where you get the right manager says yes, and over a certain level gets escalated again, those sort of workflows, all sent through an email to advise and then a secure screen to approve on remote devices like a mobile or on a web screen from anywhere. So those sort of workflows. It also has workflows across Sage. Create a new vendor, not until the boss says yes. So those sort of workflows. So I just mentioned that because that can be quite functional. Another advanced module, which I suppose we do see a number of users using, probably everyone, is EFT processing. It's not part of core Sage. It's made in Australia and is like fairly, I'd say, core functionality for everyone, really. Okay, new features. So I'll just quickly look through a few new features that Sage have added, which may be familiar, but just to call them out. So within Sage, we now are enabled, if you have the subscription version of Sage. If you don't have subscription, this feature isn't available. It's only been included with the subscription type, which we can support you getting. It's not a dramatic change. Allows us to do tax. So if you can see here in the General Ledger Journal, I can do a direct entry in the journal, which will make a tax effect. So if I click Create Tax Details, it does one side of the journal, because of course that's got to head off to my GST account. But importantly, you can see that it also asks for the authority and tax type here. So when I do journal entries, I get to nominate the authority and nominate whether it's an expense type or not recoverable. So essentially, this is mapped back. So the core point is I can do tax work in the GL, which would directly map back to my tax reporting in Sage, as opposed to tax reporting only capturing entries from payables, receivables, bank, which is the classic. And then if I need to reconcile my BAS and add some journals, I have to do that outside of the Sage report. Whereas here I can push it in, not only affecting the GL account, but also my report. Okay. The other note is that of course also then flows through to the Australian tax reporting, which is another feature that that's available in the more recent versions of Sage. I think it's been there for 2 or 3 versions, where we have the ability to configure and then print a BAS. So that's been there for a while. Okay, another point to make a note is that there's now the ability to reserve a LanPak. So if you're in the users area, you can pick a user and reserve it a LanPak. Great if you're the key user and you must be able to get in, or classically you might have a third advanced module that uses a special user login, and you have to lock down that LanPak so that we can always have that login. So what it does, if you've got 5 users and you click this on one, there's only 4 more users available, of course. So that's great. You don't have to use it. You can use it on multiple people. There it is. And another area is just that the security in Sage has improved. So we do have more complex security requirements that can be added in the background. So forcing, complex passwords, certain lengths, and so on, which is nice. And a key feature I'll just shout out to quickly is that there's a new feature called activity logs. Activity logs is great. So what we need to do is first give someone permission to see them. Now, admin can always see them, but if you're not admin, I should allow you to then, you get this group ID, we need to add this report to it. So firstly, someone can report on it. Okay, that's the first step. The second step, which is quite important, is to turn activity logs on in the background of that company. So this is not inside main Sage, but in our setup area, there's a tick saying allow activity logging in this company, because of course it's got a small resource overhead in size, principally building a bit of data. Once you've turned it on, then we get this report being functional. So until it's on, it's blank. And I don't recall what data is sitting in this test company, but the key is that here it is. So I can pick one company or just the current, so it's got a multi-company idea, and it will show who's been logging into Sage and what screens they've been opening. So for instance, in this company, from my laptop, this is mine, laptop 226. At this moment, I open this company, and this is me as the user, so it's about Sage users, but you can see the associated computer, what screen I opened, and then what screen I closed. So, and then when did I log out? So it really does show my ins and outs. So you can see that essentially complements the audit logger right here and gives us an additional layer of logging. Of course, this can become enormous, so it's really not something that it's not nighttime reading. Okay, so again, that's a new feature. I think it's new in 2023. So if you can't see this icon and you're in 23, come back to us. Or if you see it and it's blank, we just do need to set up the logging. It's turn that on.